when I was in Greece on the islands, there was a lot of pulling boats out of the water. So they would come to shore and usually the motor would stop working. So we'd go in and pull the boat up, help the people out, give them dry clothes, food at first sort of response. And then we help them in the camps and help them get through the asylum seeking process. Well, not the whole process, but help them get registered so they're legally there as refugees. And when I was in Lebanon, it was a lot of aid distribution. We did massive distributions of heating oil and food, blankets and so on, or we repaired huts. And when I was on the border with Macedonia, when the borders closed, I worked with a medical team, and we basically had an open clinic running in the camps. I always just arrived and showed up on the hotspot. So I showed up in Lesvos when there was the most boats coming in and the most deaths happening. I showed up on the border with Macedonia when the borders closed, and they wrote out again on Facebook, we don't have enough volunteers. There's about, at the time it was 12,000 refugees stuck in a field. So we went there, and at the time I was in Lebanon. And Lebanon, I saw on Facebook there was 2 volunteers that had previously been in Gaziantep or on Lesvos, who were running around Lebanon seeing what they can do there. So I messaged them saying, can I join you? I think one of the biggest issues in trying to organize that is that you need to do the bureaucracy beforehand. Usually you need to vet who's going to go and volunteer, give them a little bit of training, by which time several weeks might have passed. So every time I arrived, it was days after there was an issue, and if I had sent out a message to an NGO saying I'm available to help, they'd get back to me in a couple days, and the process that I just described, and I wouldn't have been there for a couple weeks, maybe even months. So it depends. This was very much an emergency response. What could have been done better is that the bigger responses should have had these people ready to be there, and it took months and months. Not even 2 months, but 6 to 8 months. I just initiated an NGO in Prague called Go Think Initiative. And it's in reaction to the response of Europe, and more the response of Europe's population. So what I was talking about, misinterpretation of facts because the media doesn't really give clear and correct information. So we're trying to get rid of stereotypes. We're trying to battle racism and xenophobia with education and information. So I think we need to involve Europe's population a lot more, because they are the ones that are influencing policy decisions, and politicians there's been so many votes this year, and a lot of them had migration as the key element that was important for who's going to get which votes. And Brexit was a huge deal, and a lot of it was about migration. So it's very important to inform our public. It's very important to keep them informed about information and facts and data, rather than just the rhetoric of politicians. So that's where I'm starting my initiative, and I think through bringing my personal experience to the table and talking to larger crowds and schools about it, then I think people will try to look for different information and they'll start questioning what they're reading. We have some private donors. We're applying to international grants. One of the most ironic things about it is that we're part of the European Union. There's thousands and thousands. When you look at the website for grants under the European Union, there's hundreds, and it's very difficult to actually migrate through those grants, and they're very specific. In the end, after hours and hours of research, you find out that there's no grant that you can apply for unless you're a huge organization or you're a coalition of different NGOs, and that you share the grant. So EU grants, which is the most obvious funding, as well as most people that I know from the Czech Republic that work in policy or that work in think tanks, they hear about what I started and they say, well, that's perfect, you should get EU funding. But there's no way to get it. It's very difficult. First of all, there is no grant that I can specifically apply for. I'd have to be part of a coalition. So right now we're applying for grants that are international. They're not based in Europe necessarily, or the Czech Republic.